Hello, this is Juliet and Stephen of Open Square, and today's question from an IT leader is, I'm struggling to build a relationship with sales. Do you have any tips? And just some context behind this is they're finding it a constant challenge working with their sales team, but we don't have anything specific.
Okay, so if we don't have anything specific, then let's talk about relationships with teams in general, which will apply to sales, I think, as much as anything else. And then if we've got some specific sales ideas, we can add those in along the way. So is it worth talking a bit about what causes some challenges with relationships, and then we can maybe try and address some of those?
Yeah. So for me, I think the main cause is not understanding of what is influencing the other team or the other person's world, what drivers are coming in, what their priorities are and what pressures are going on. And there'll be a number of reasons for that, but that not understanding and not having that awareness of the other team.
Okay, so touching a little bit on the social identity, them and us stuff, of not having an awareness of, or rather because you don't have an awareness of the other team and the things you're talking about, human nature takes over. You categorise it, make assumptions. Because they're not handling it in the way that I would, they must be wrong, or they must be bad. That sort of idea. Okay. So awareness is definitely one.
Personality.
Oh, so individual personality clashes.
Or conflict,
I just, for whatever reason, I just can't get on with that other person. Although perhaps that's very similar kind of cause.
Yes.
In the first place, different kind of destinations. Perhaps picking up on a point you made about not understanding, and maybe that's a sub-cause, it could be that people are actually unknowingly going in slightly different directions. So aiming at a different outcome or a different end point, and if that's the case, then what can you... it's going to be difficult because there's no alignment of the teams anyway. If you've got 12 people sitting around a table and every single one of them has got a different responsibility or a different target, then inevitably you're going to have a split and them and us type stuff.
I hear the words, just go and work with another team, go and work with them, go and sit with them. That doesn't always work either.
No. Okay, so we've got some of that stuff going on perhaps in this case. Let's make an assumption that we do.
Yes.
How does this particular leader act? What could they do today that will start to improve that relationship?
So I tend to suggest that put yourself in their shoes. So before you go and speak to them and have a meeting with them, but put yourself in their shoes. What challenges are they facing? What are their priorities? What are the customer demands? What are the targets? Because if we take an assumption that this is a peer level group, you will be aware of their targets and their objectives for that quarter, that year, or whatever. So you'll have some of that understanding. So put yourself in their shoes. Obviously you won't necessarily know, you might not know all the drivers or all the influences to that person's world, but at least it starts you thinking about, I wonder what's going on in their world. I
would agree, and I'm pleased you said the last bit, because I think even though you might be aware of their targets and their outcomes, you probably aren't that well connected to why they've chosen those, why they're taking that particular path to the destination, and that in itself it perhaps is a gap in knowledge. So if you do that, presumably the next thing to do is then try and find some time with that person, and take the Stephen Covey kind of approach of, if you want to be understood, seek first to understand. And I would strongly encourage you to do that as a first step, to arrange a meeting with them or arrange some time with them where you can effectively listen to where they are. So perhaps stage the meeting as I'd really like to understand more about you and your team, where you're taking things, because I might be able to support you in a different way or in a better way. But set it up as I would like to do something to help you, rather than we've got to talk about our relationship, is not a great way to start that first conversation.
So it's a great way. So what would you do, so I can just hear some replays back to me to say that, the other person makes them say, oh, typical sales, you know, they're still on that path. They think that I'm just going to turn over and do everything for them and get my teams, because, you know, they might be thinking, oh, great, they're finally going to do what I asked them to do. So how do you almost like restructure and reframe that meeting to make sure that you're not going in and just gaining a whole load of stuff back on you and your teams? How do you ensure that that other person, that you're listening, but that other person is understanding as to why you're calling that meeting?
Okay, so you could maybe preempt that a little bit by saying, I'd like to understand more about you, so that we can improve how we work together, or improve our whatever, which provides a little bit of light in there. It depends on the personality you've got across the table. Sometimes you've got someone that will provide their story, and then by default, most people would then say, tell me more about you. Most people would do that.
Yeah.
If they don't, then you can, I don't know, engineer, but you can kind of move the conversation to that point by saying, thank you ever so much for sharing. Here's how I think we can approach that at the moment, because our own priorities are over here. So you can kind of push that angle into the conversation. And perhaps if you do that and it still doesn't get anywhere, then return to my question earlier and kind of perhaps take it head on if you've tried some of this stuff already, and say, we really do need to talk about our relationship, because the relationship somehow is disadvantaging. The other route, and especially if the relationships aren't clear in more than one place across a team or a group of functions, would be to do it together in the first place. So run a workshop where you talk about expectations of each other, and that's this is another liberating structure thing that we talked about before. But an exercise where you get each of the teams to be very partisan and talk about what it is that they need from everybody else, and communicate that and say, this is what I need from you. But then the other team, the person who is the supplier in this case, the person who's going to give that stuff, then has to respond and say, effectively, they will fulfill those expectations, they won't, or they don't understand what those expectations are. Or there's more detail in the liberating structures thing. There's a fourth category too about not right now. But the point is, don't worry about that detail. The point is to, rather than just talk about expectations, because that's good but not good enough, talk about the commitment to those expectations. Because then you've got an opportunity as a leadership team to revisit that too, and say, 3 months ago we said that these were our expectations, how are they being fulfilled?
Yeah, and I think that's really important, because if you can, and you won't just have one conversation with with the person you're having a difficult relationship with. It's got to be continuous.
Yes.
But also you need to make sure that's culturally happening. So if you recognise that maybe in your own senior leadership meeting you're not having those open conversations, and you're just turning up to say, this is what's going on this month, and then you all disembark and go on your own spaceships, if you like. But you're all coming together and learning and understanding of what the challenges and frustrations that are happening.
Yeah, okay. I just take that as the last comment, just to emphasise, it's not one thing. There's no immediate solution to this. You need some tenacity, and probably to show some vulnerability through this process, so that you spend enough time with the other person to create your own in-group. You now have got a colleague and a supporter and so on, rather than someone else that just happens to be in the leadership team. But that takes time and repetition.
So thank you very much for your question. We hope our ramblings have helped you somewhat, and it's given you some tips. If you have any questions or comments, please do let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Also, do hit subscribe to our YouTube channel, and you'll be notified of all our upcoming videos. Thank you.